The glow of Anthony's phone screen lit up the dark bedroom like a betrayal I couldn't ignore. There it was, message after message from his ex, proving he had never really let go. My heart pounded as I scrolled through the texts, each one more intimate than the last. "I miss you," one read. "When can we meet again?" Another. They were dated just last week, while I was away on a business trip to Los Angeles. Anthony and I had been together for 3 years, building what I thought was a solid life in our cozy Brooklyn apartment. We met at a Pride event in New York City, both of us fresh out of college, full of dreams and hopes for a future where our love could thrive without judgment. He was charming, with his easy smile and warm brown eyes that made me feel seen for the first time. But now I sat on the edge of the bed, the phone heavy in my hands. Anthony was still in the shower, the sound of water masking my silent breakdown. How could he do this? I thought back to the promises we made, the nights we spent talking about coming out to our families, the way he held me when the world felt too heavy. "My name is Malik Thompson, a 28-year-old graphic designer working for a small firm in Manhattan. Anthony, 30, worked in marketing. We were the couple everyone envied at parties. Open, affectionate, unapologetically us. Or so I thought. When he emerged from the bathroom, towel around his waist, his smile faded when he saw my face. "Malik, what's wrong?" he asked, stepping closer. I held up the phone. "Explain this," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside. His face paled. "It's not what it looks like. Jordan is just an old friend. We were catching up." But the messages told a different story. They weren't just catching up. They were planning secret meetups, sharing memories that should have stayed in the past. "I can't believe this," I whispered, standing up. The room felt smaller, the walls closing in. "You've been seeing him behind my back." Anthony reached for me, but I stepped back. "Malik, please." It was a mistake. It didn't mean anything, but it did mean something to me. It meant everything I had built was crumbling. That night, I packed a bag. I couldn't stay. The decision came like a lightning bolt. I had to leave. As I walked out the door into the chilly New York night, the city lights blurred through my tears. Where would I go? My best friend Ethan lived nearby, but even that felt too close. I needed space to breathe, to think about who I was without Anthony. The streets of Brooklyn were alive with people heading home from late shifts, but I felt completely alone for the first time in years. I hailed a cab and headed to a small hotel in Midtown, the kind with generic art on the walls and a minibar that I ignored. By morning, my phone was flooded with missed calls from Anthony. His voicemails played on repeat in my head even before I listened. "Baby, we can fix this. Please talk to me." But fixing it wasn't an option. Not yet. Not when every text I had read replayed like a movie I couldn't pause. I stared at my reflection in the hotel mirror, the same face that had smiled beside Anthony at rooftop parties and family dinners we hosted for our chosen friends. Now it looked hollow. Growing up in a small town in Ohio with parents who still sent me church pamphlets every holiday, I had fought hard to build this life in the city. Moving to New York at 22 was my declaration of freedom. Meeting Anthony felt like the final piece. He understood the pressure I carried, the way my dad's quiet disapproval lingered even after I came out to them at 25. They said they accepted me, but their questions about when you'll meet a nice girl never fully stopped. Anthony had been my safe space through all of it. I called Ethan around noon. "I left him," I said simply when he picked up. There was a long pause on the line. "What happened?" he asked, his voice already laced with concern. I told him everything, the messages, the excuses, the way my chest felt like it was caving in. Ethan didn't hesitate. "Come over. You can crash on the couch as long as you need." His apartment in Queens was a short subway ride away, and by evening I was there, surrounded by the familiar chaos of his art supplies and half-empty coffee mugs. Ethan had been my rock since college, the one who dragged me to my first Pride parade and never once made me feel less than for being exactly who I was. We sat on his couch with takeout Thai food, and I poured out every detail. I just don't understand how he could do this after everything, I said, pushing rice around my plate. Ethan nodded, his expression tight. Anthony always seemed solid, but people hide things, man. You did the right thing walking out. His words helped, but the ache remained. That night, as I tried to sleep on the pull-out, memories flooded in. The weekend we drove upstate to see the leaves change. Anthony's hand on my knee the whole way. The way he whispered, "I love you," during quiet mornings. How could those moments coexist with the lies? The next day, Anthony showed up at Ethan's door. I heard his voice through the wood before Ethan even opened it. "I just need 5 minutes with him." Ethan glanced at me, and I nodded reluctantly. Anthony stepped inside, eyes red-rimmed. "Malik, I swear it was only a couple of times. Jordan reached out after his breakup, and I felt guilty. But it's over. You're the one I want." His words hung in the air, but they felt hollow. I looked at him, really looked, and saw the man I had loved cracking under the weight of his own choices. "You don't get to decide when it's over for me," I said quietly. "I need time. And space." He left after that, shoulders slumped, and I felt a strange mix of relief and emptiness. Leaving wasn't just about the cheating. It was about the version of myself I had tied to him. For 3 years, Anthony had been my anchor in a city that could swallow you whole. Without him, I had to figure out who Malik Thompson really was beyond the boyfriend label. That realization hit harder than the betrayal itself. I spent the rest of the week job hunting remotely, avoiding the office where everyone knew us as a couple, and walking the streets of Queens at night to clear my head. The city felt different now, sharper, more honest. By the end of the week, I had rented a tiny studio in Bushwick through a friend of a friend. It was barely big enough for a bed and a desk, but it was mine. Moving my things from the Brooklyn apartment felt like closing a chapter one wasn't ready to end. Anthony wasn't there when I picked up the last boxes, but he had left a note on the kitchen counter. "I'll always love you. Call when you're ready." I crumpled it and threw it away. Ready wasn't coming anytime soon. That first night alone in the new place, I sat on the floor with a single lamp on and let myself cry for the first time since finding the messages. The tears weren't just for Anthony. They were for the boy from Ohio who had dreamed of a love that would prove everyone wrong about people like us. They were for the man I was becoming, one who refused to settle for half-truths. Sleep came eventually, but the questions lingered. What now? Who was I without the relationship that had defined me? The answer wasn't clear, but the decision to leave had already set something in motion. I could feel it shifting inside me, like the first crack of light after a long night. The days blurred into a routine that kept me moving forward even when my mind wanted to spiral. Mornings started with strong coffee from the corner bodega and long walks through Bushwick, sketching ideas for client projects on my tablet to distract from the emptiness. Work helped. My boss at the design firm had no idea about the breakup yet, and I kept it that way, burying myself in logos and website layouts until the ache dulled to a background hum. But evenings were harder. The silence in my studio pressed in, reminding me of all the little things I missed. Anthony's laugh echoing off the walls. The way he would steal bites from my plate during dinner. Simple things that now felt like ghosts. Ethan checked in every day, sometimes dropping by with groceries or just to sit in comfortable quiet. "You're doing better than you think," he told me one afternoon while we grabbed slices at the pizza place down the block. Most guys would have gone back by now. I wanted to believe him, but doubt crept in during quiet moments. Had I overreacted? Was it really cheating if it was just texting and a couple of coffees? No. The secrecy made it real. The way Anthony had looked me in the eye every night and said nothing made it unforgivable. Then came the call from my parents. My mom's voice was bright at first, asking about work and the weather in New York. But the conversation shifted when she mentioned Thanksgiving. "Your father and I were hoping you and Anthony could drive out this year. It's been too long since we had the whole family together." I froze, fork halfway to my mouth during a quick lunch break. The truth sat heavy on my tongue. Mom, Anthony and I were not together anymore. The line went quiet. What happened, honey? You two seemed so happy. I gave her the short version, leaving out the details that would only make her worry more. She sighed, the kind of sigh that carried years of unspoken hopes. I'm sorry, Malik. We always liked him. But maybe this is for the best. You know your father still thinks you'll settle down one day. The words stung because they echoed the doubts I had buried long ago. My parents had tried to accept me after I came out, but their traditional values from their own small-town upbringing never fully faded. Dad still asked about grandkids someday, in that careful way that made it clear he meant with a woman. I hung up feeling raw. That night, I scrolled through old photos on my phone, deleting the ones of Anthony and me smiling at brunch or on vacation in Miami. Each swipe hurt, but it also felt necessary. By midnight, the album was half empty, and so was I. Sleep didn't come easy. Instead, I lay awake replaying conversations with Anthony from the past year. Had there been clues? The late nights at the office he blamed on deadlines. The weekend he said he was visiting his sister in Jersey but came back smelling faintly of a cologne I didn't recognize. I had ignored them because love made me blind. Now the blindfold was off and the world looked different. Sharper. Less forgiving. The confrontation with Anthony came 2 weeks later. He texted asking to meet at our old favorite coffee shop in Williamsburg. Neutral ground, he said. I agreed because part of me still needed closure. When I walked in, he was already there, 2 lattes on the table like old times. His eyes lit up when he saw me, but the spark died when I sat down without smiling. You look good, he started, but I cut him off. Just say what you need to say. He leaned forward, hands clasped. Jordan and I have history from before you. When he called after his divorce, I thought I could help him without it affecting us. But I was wrong. It got out of hand, and I'm sorry. I ended it for good the day you left. His voice cracked. I love you, Malik. Give us another chance. I studied his face, the familiar curve of his jaw, the worry lines that hadn't been there 3 years ago. For a second, I wavered. The pull of comfort was strong. But then I remembered the messages, the lies stacked like bricks between us. Love isn't enough if there's no trust, I said. I need to figure out who I am without you. He nodded slowly, tears gathering. I understand. But if you change your mind, I stood up before he could finish. Don't wait for that. Walking out of the shop into the crisp fall air felt like shedding a weight. My steps were lighter, even if my chest still ached. Back at the studio, I called Ethan to debrief. You did the hard thing, he said. Proud of you, but pride didn't fill the quiet evenings. I started going to a local LGBTQ support group on Thursdays, sitting in a circle of strangers sharing their own stories of heartbreak and growth. Listening to them made me realize I wasn't alone. One guy, a teacher named Ryan, talked about leaving a 7-year relationship after discovering similar secrets. His words stuck with me. Sometimes leaving is the most loving thing you can do for yourself. I nodded along, but applying it to my life was harder. Work picked up with a big campaign for a nonprofit, keeping my days full. I poured my energy into designs that actually meant something, colors and layouts that reflected resilience. The creative flow helped more than I expected. But family pressure mounted when my sister texted about Thanksgiving plans. Dad's been asking about you. Please come home. We miss you. I stared at the message for a long time before replying that I would think about it. The idea of facing them without Anthony by my side terrified me. They had met him twice and liked him, seeing him as proof that my life was stable. Now I would show up alone, carrying the weight of another failed relationship in their eyes. The weekend before Thanksgiving, I took a solo trip to Central Park to clear my head. The trees were bare, the paths dusted with fallen leaves. I sat on a bench near the lake and let the cold wind bite my cheeks. For the first time, I asked myself the question I had been avoiding. What did I really want? Not what Anthony wanted, not what my parents expected. Just me. The answer surprised me. I wanted peace. I wanted to wake up without the constant replay of betrayal in my mind. I wanted to love myself enough to never settle again. That realization didn't erase the pain, but it gave me direction. When I got back to the studio that night, I booked a train ticket to Ohio. Going home was scary, but running from it felt worse. The decision to leave Anthony had already changed me. Now it was time to see what else it could do. The train ride to Ohio gave me too much time to think. Rolling through the Pennsylvania countryside, I watched the landscape shift from city sprawl to open fields, each mile pulling me closer to the version of myself I had left behind at 18. My parents' house in a quiet suburb outside Columbus still looked the same. White siding, neatly trimmed lawn, the American flag hanging by the door. Mom hugged me tight the moment I stepped off the platform. "You look thin," she said, fussing over my coat. Dad shook my hand with that firm grip, his eyes searching mine for answers I wasn't ready to give. My sister, Lena, waited inside with her husband and their 2 kids, the house filled with the smell of roasting turkey and the noise of family that used to comfort me. Thanksgiving dinner was polite on the surface. We talked about work, the weather, Lena's new job. But the empty chair where Anthony would have sat felt like a spotlight. Halfway through the pumpkin pie, Dad cleared his throat. "So what happened with Anthony? Your mother mentioned you 2 split." The room went quiet. I set my fork down. "He wasn't honest with me. I needed to leave." Mom's eyes softened. "I'm sorry, honey. But maybe this opens the door for something better. A real family someday." The words landed like a punch. Mom, Anthony was real. I'm gay. That doesn't change because one relationship ended. Dad shifted uncomfortably. "We know that, son. But you're 30 soon. We just want you settled." Settled. The word carried layers of expectation I had been dodging for years. The conversation didn't escalate into a fight, but the tension lingered. That night in my old childhood bedroom, surrounded by high school trophies and faded posters, I stared at the ceiling. Leaving Anthony had forced me to face how much of my identity was still tied to proving something to them. I wasn't just gay in New York. I was their son in Ohio, carrying the weight of their hopes. Sleep came late, interrupted by dreams of Anthony's face the day I walked out. The next morning, Ethan texted asking how it was going. I replied with a simple heavy. He sent back a heart emoji and a reminder that I didn't owe anyone my happiness. His support grounded me. Over coffee with Lena later, she asked the hard questions. "Do you still love him?" I thought about it. Part of me does. But loving him wasn't enough when trust was gone. She nodded. "You've always been the strong one, Malik. Don't forget that." Her words helped, but the real test came that afternoon when Anthony called. I answered without thinking. "I heard you went home," he said softly. "How's your family?" The familiarity in his voice cracked something inside me. "They're fine." "Why are you calling?" He hesitated. "I miss you, and I wanted to tell you the full truth. Jordan wasn't just an ex. He was my first love, and when he reached out, old feelings came back. But I chose you. I still choose you." The confession hit like a wave. I had suspected deeper history, but hearing it confirmed the betrayal on a new level. "You should have told me that from the start," I said, voice tight, "instead of letting me build a life on half-truths." He didn't argue. "I know. I was scared of losing you." I hung up before the tears started. Sitting on the back porch, watching the November wind strip the last leaves from the trees, I let myself feel the anger fully. Not just at Anthony, but at myself for ignoring the signs. For wanting the relationship so badly that I overlooked the cracks. My dad found me there later. He sat down without speaking at first, then said, "Your mother and I didn't do everything right. We're trying. But seeing you hurt like this, it's hard." For the first time in years, I heard real vulnerability in his voice. I'm trying too, Dad. Trying to be honest with myself. He patted my shoulder awkwardly. It wasn't perfect acceptance, but it was progress. The rest of the weekend passed in a blur of family activities and quiet conversations. I helped Mom with dishes, played with my nieces, and avoided deep talks. But inside, something was shifting. The decision to leave Anthony wasn't just about him anymore. It was about claiming space for the man I was becoming. On the train back to New York Sunday night, I felt lighter. The city lights welcomed me like an old friend when I stepped off at Penn Station. Back in the studio, I threw myself into work and the support group. Ryan, the teacher from group, suggested coffee one evening after a meeting. We talked for hours about everything but romance. His stories of coming out in a conservative family mirrored mine in ways that felt comforting. The leaving part sucks, he said. But the becoming part? That's where life starts. I left that coffee feeling hopeful for the first time in months. Then the misunderstanding hit. Ethan called one night sounding off. Look, I didn't want to tell you this, but Anthony reached out to me last week. He asked if I knew where you were staying and if you were seeing anyone. The news landed like a slap. My best friend had kept it from me. Why didn't you say something? I asked, hurt rising. Ethan sighed. I thought I was protecting you. He sounded desperate and I told him to back off. But maybe I should have told you. The betrayal from Ethan, however well-intentioned, cracked our friendship in a new way. I needed time to process. I get it, I said finally. But no more secrets. The weeks after Thanksgiving brought more changes. I started therapy, recommended by the group facilitator. My therapist, Dr. Patel, helped me unpack the layers. Leaving was your first act of self-respect, she said during our second session. Now let's build on that. Sessions became anchors. I learned to separate Anthony's choices from my worth. The holidays passed quietly. I spent Christmas with Ethan, our friendship mending slowly over board games and bad movies. Anthony sent a card but respected my space. By New Year's Eve, I stood on my rooftop watching fireworks over the city. The year ahead felt open. I had left the relationship, faced my family, and started questioning everything I thought I knew about love. The journey wasn't over, but the path was clearer. Little did I know the biggest turning point was still coming. January brought freezing winds and a new project at work that consumed my days. Designing a campaign for a mental health nonprofit felt personal now. I poured late nights into mood boards filled with images of resilience and quiet strength, colors that echoed the shift happening inside me. The distraction was welcome. Therapy sessions twice a week peeled back more layers. Dr. Patel encouraged me to write letters I never sent, pouring out the anger and love I still carried for Anthony. It's not about him reading them, she said. It's about you releasing them. I filled pages, then burned some in a metal bowl on the fire escape, watching the smoke rise into the winter sky. Ethan and I rebuilt slowly. We met for runs along the East River, the rhythm of our footsteps matching the conversations we needed to have. I should have told you about Anthony's call, he admitted one cold morning. I was scared you'd go back. I understood. Friendship wasn't perfect, but his loyalty had always been there, even when misplaced. We're good, I told him. Just no more hiding things. He nodded and we kept running. Then the secret came out in the worst way. Anthony showed up at my office building one afternoon, waiting by the elevator as I left for lunch. His face was gaunt, eyes shadowed. I need to talk to you, he said. It's important. I led him to a nearby park bench, the cold seeping through my coat. Jordan wasn't just reaching out because of his divorce. Anthony confessed, voice low. He had photos from years ago before we met. Private ones. He threatened to send them to my boss if I didn't meet him. Panicked. That's why I kept seeing him. To keep him quiet. The revelation stunned me. Blackmail. Not just lingering feelings. Why didn't you tell me? I asked, anger mixing with pity. We could have faced it together. He looked down. I was ashamed. I thought I could handle it alone. The misunderstanding that had fueled my decision to leave suddenly looked different. Not simple cheating, but fear and desperation. Yet the secrecy still hurt. You chose silence over us, I said. That's what broke us. He left after that, promising no more contact unless I reached out. I sat on the bench long after he was gone, processing. The betrayal ran deeper than I knew, but so did his fear. In a world that still judged men like us, secrets could feel like survival. That night, I told Ethan everything. Damn, he said. That explains a lot. But it doesn't excuse not trusting you. We talked until late, and for the first time, I felt the anger easing into understanding. Not forgiveness yet, but clarity. The real turning point arrived in February with a phone call from my sister. Dad had a heart attack, she said, voice shaking. He's stable, but it was scary. You need to come home. I booked the next flight, heart racing the entire way. At the hospital in Columbus, Dad looked smaller in the bed, monitors beeping steadily. Mom held his hand, eyes red. When he saw me, he managed a weak smile. Didn't mean to worry you, son. We talked in fragments over the next days. The scare had shifted something in him. I've been hard on you, he admitted one quiet afternoon. About the gay thing. Seeing you alone after Anthony, it made me realize I don't want to lose you over old ideas. Tears came then, for both of us. Lena squeezed my shoulder. He's been asking about you every day. During that week, Anthony texted once. Heard about your dad. Sending strength. I didn't reply, but the gesture landed softly. Back in New York after Dad was discharged, I felt changed. The family confrontation I had feared for years had happened not in anger, but in vulnerability. The sacrifice of almost losing my father made me see what mattered. Acceptance wasn't given. It was built, one honest conversation at a time. March brought spring hints and a new sense of purpose. I started volunteering at the LGBTQ center downtown, mentoring younger guys navigating their own identities. One kid, barely 20, reminded me of myself leaving Ohio. How did you know when to walk away? He asked during a session. I thought of Anthony. When staying meant losing yourself. The words felt true. Ethan threw a small birthday party for me in late March. No Anthony, just close friends and laughter. Ryan from group came and we talked late into the night. His quiet presence felt steady, not romantic yet, but possible. I wasn't ready for new love, but the door was open. The psychological weight of the past months had lifted enough for me to breathe. Decisions had consequences, but they also led to growth. I was becoming the man I wanted to be, not the one defined by someone else's secrets. Spring in New York exploded with color, and I matched its energy with changes of my own. I redecorated the studio, painting walls a soft gray and hanging prints that reflected the journey I was on. Work flourished. The nonprofit campaign launched to great reviews, and my boss offered me a promotion. You've brought something real to the designs lately, she said. The compliment meant more than she knew. Therapy continued, helping me trace the roots of my need for approval back to childhood. You don't have to earn love by being perfect, Patel reminded me. Those words became a mantra. The misunderstanding with Anthony fully unraveled during an unexpected encounter in April. I ran into him at a mutual friend's art opening in Chelsea. He was alone, nursing a drink by the window. Our eyes met across the room, and he approached cautiously. Can we talk outside? He asked. We stepped onto the sidewalk, city noise swirling around us. I've been seeing a therapist too, he said. Realized the blackmail wasn't the only reason I hid things. I was scared of fully committing because part of me still worried what people would think. My family, my job. But losing you showed me what matters. His honesty was raw. I listened without interrupting. "I'm not asking for another chance," he continued. "I just wanted you to know the truth. You deserved it then, and you deserve it now." The conversation closed a chapter one thought was still open. No anger remained, just a quiet respect for the man he was trying to become. We hugged briefly, and I walked away feeling lighter than I had in months. Friendship with Ethan strengthened through weekly hikes in upstate parks. One weekend, as we sat by a lake, he opened up about his own struggles. "Watching you go through this made me realize I've been hiding parts of myself too," he admitted. "Not with relationships, but with family stuff." His vulnerability deepened our bond. No more rifts, just real support. The loyalty I had always counted on was back, stronger. Family calls became regular and honest. Dad recovered well and started asking real questions about my life in New York. "Tell me about the center you volunteer at," he said one Sunday. "Mom sent care packages with my favorite cookies." The traditional expectations hadn't vanished, but they bent enough for acceptance to grow. The sacrifice of nearly losing my father had forced all of us to choose honesty over comfort. May brought the emotional climax I never saw coming. Ryan and I had been spending more time together, not dating but sharing long walks and deep talks. One evening on the Brooklyn Bridge, watching the sunset paint the skyline gold, he turned to me. "I've been falling for you," he said simply. "But I know you're still healing." His words caught me off guard. For the first time since leaving Anthony, my heart stirred without fear. "I'm not ready for everything," I replied honestly. "But I want to see where this goes, slowly." We stood there as the city lights flickered on, the moment feeling like the turning point I had been building toward. Not a replacement for the past, but a new beginning rooted in truth. That night, alone in the studio, I reflected on the full journey. The shocking discovery on Anthony's phone had shattered my world. The decision to leave had forced me to face every hidden fear about identity and worth. Misunderstandings, secrets revealed, the near loss of family and friends, all of it had tested me. But each consequence had shaped me. I no longer defined myself by who loved me. I defined myself by how I showed up for myself. The psychological growth was real. I slept soundly for the first time in almost a year. June arrived with Pride Month celebrations. I marched with the center's group, rainbow flags waving, surrounded by people who understood the fight for acceptance. Anthony texted a simple Happy Pride message. I replied with the same. No bitterness remained. Ethan marched beside me, Ryan on my other side. The energy of the crowd lifted me. For the first time, I felt completely at home in my skin. The societal pressures that once weighed me down now felt like distant echoes. I had faced them and come out stronger. The summer unfolded with small joys. Weekend trips to the beach with friends, late-night talks with Ryan that built something real and unhurried. Work continued to thrive. Family visits became easier, filled with genuine laughter. The journey that started with betrayal had led me to a place of deep self-acceptance. I still carried scars, but they were badges now, reminders of the man I had chosen to become. Summer heat wrapped New York in a humid embrace, but my life felt cooler, more balanced. Ryan and I had started dating officially in July, keeping things slow and honest from the beginning. Our first real date was a simple picnic in Prospect Park, talking about everything from childhood dreams to future hopes. No secrets, no games. "I like how real this feels," he said as we packed up. I smiled, knowing exactly what he meant. The contrast with my past made every moment sweeter. Anthony faded into a respectful memory. We ran into each other once at a coffee shop and exchanged genuine well wishes. The betrayal that once defined my days had become a lesson I carried lightly. Ethan and I solidified our friendship with a weekend getaway to the Hamptons. Sitting on the beach watching waves roll in, he raised a toast. To choosing yourself first. We clinked bottles, laughing at how far we had come. His earlier secrecy was long forgiven. True friends grew through the cracks. Family visits in August felt like homecomings. Dad grilled burgers in the backyard and asked about Ryan without hesitation. "Bring him next time," he said casually. Mom hugged me extra tight. The traditional expectations had evolved into quiet support. The sacrifice during Dad's health scare had paid off in ways I never imagined. By September, I had taken on a leadership role at the LGBTQ Center, mentoring more young men navigating their own paths. One session, a kid shared his story of leaving a toxic relationship, and I saw myself in his eyes. "It gets better," I told the group. "Not because the pain disappears, but because you learn to carry it differently." My words came from experience. The psychological growth was evident in small ways. I no longer second-guessed my worth. Decisions felt clearer. Consequences were lessons, not punishments. October brought cooler air and a sense of closure. Ryan and I celebrated 6 months with a quiet dinner. "You've changed my life," he said across the candlelight. In the best way. I felt the same. Our connection wasn't about fixing each other. It was about walking beside someone who respected the journey. Work offered me a senior designer position, and I accepted, excited for new projects that reflected the man I had become. The city that once witnessed my heartbreak now celebrated my growth. November rolled around with Thanksgiving approaching again. This year, I invited Ryan home to Ohio. The drive felt different, lighter. Mom welcomed him warmly. Dad shook his hand firmly. Lena pulled me aside later. "He's good for you." Dinner conversation flowed easily. No empty chairs. No heavy silences. The family that once carried unspoken expectations now embraced the full me. The path from betrayal to acceptance had been long, but every step was worth it. As the year wound down, I stood on the same rooftop where I had watched fireworks months earlier. The city sparkled below, full of possibility. The journey that started with a shocking discovery on a phone screen had transformed me completely. I had faced misunderstandings, revealed secrets, endured betrayal, made sacrifices, and stared down the truth about myself. In doing so, I found a love deeper than any relationship: self-acceptance. The man who walked out of that Brooklyn apartment was gone. In his place stood someone stronger, kinder, and finally free. True or false? Betrayal is always the end of love, or can it be the beginning of the truest acceptance you will ever know?